and they're looking for businesses, you know, uh, uh, why do they want to attack you? You know, honestly, I've never actually talked to one of the guys. Um, I don't know, but they do it all the time, right? The reality is they're looking for financial gain, right? And they'll take advantage of anybody that they think they can get a financial gain from. Again, if you are a business and they probably are going to, you know, target you in a way um, so they can get a financial gain out of you. Okay, what can we do about it, right? Let's look at some of the top 10 things that we can do. One is always where to start, and one of the things that I want to communicate here today is the fact that we have to develop a security mindset first. That encompasses, doing security awareness training, identifying potential attack vectors. If you think your system is secure, get an outside perspective with somebody who can look at things in a different light, right? We can all look at our own situation, and we look at it so much, we kind of have tunnel vision and into our perspective, and sometimes we don't see the fact that hey, there's kind of an open door right over here, and was kind of forgotten about, so those are the things that we want to identify and protect. And we see, I saw a slide a long time ago. It showed the differences in the Microsoft operating systems and how much more security was in each system as each iteration. So the older systems that you have, the less secure they're going to be. So now getting into the top 10 side of it here. One, you have to monitor system activity. And we get a lot, most organizations that we are talking to today do not have any system activity monitoring going on. And what do we mean by system activity monitoring? We're talking about unusual security events. We're not talking about system uptime, right? Most everybody that is using a professional service provider or managed service provider is doing the traditional, are my systems running type monitoring, right? What we see a great lack of out there, you see it in the enterprise space, but not so much in what we call the SMB space, small, medium-sized businesses. It's very difficult to track an incident that has occurred after the fact, right? And so what we end up seeing people do is they'll put these things in after the fact. You want to have your security monitoring systems in ahead of time before an incident occurs. We have seen a tremendous uptick this year in attacks, more so than every other year. And I don't know if that has to do with what's going on in Europe, but the reality is the attacks are way up. And that security monitoring system should include a security operations center behind it, who are looking at some of these unusual events, like a login from a foreign country or a VPN connection or different things like that. It still surprises me. Number two, you've probably heard this one before, but I put it back on here because not enough people have this on. Turn on multi-factor authentication now. If you have Office 365, you have the ability to turn on multi-factor authentication on your Office 365. It is not an extra license. It's if you have the business version of Office 365, you have an ability to turn it on your Office 365 tenant account. If you're an individual in an organization and your organization decided not to, you can turn it on for yourself. Again, and then on the personal side, you can do this for your Gmail accounts. You can do this for your even for your Amazon account. The majority of accounts today are shifting to that multi-factor authentication. And just what is multi-factor authentication? That is typically something you know and something you have. So something you know is like a password. Something you have would be like a token generator. Many of these multi-factor authentication token generators, what people don't realize is the majority of them are universal. So if you want to use the Microsoft Authenticator, you can use the Microsoft Authenticator. If you want to use the Google Authenticator, you can use the Google Authenticator. The majority of them are will set up using QR codes. So get familiar with how to turn on multi-factor authentication on your different systems, both personal and on your professional side. Reiterating a little bit what I was talking about before, old systems are insecure systems. I get it. They're still running. You paid a lot of money for it, you know, and it feels like you just bought it yesterday, except it's really, 10 years old. Running a 10-year-old operating system today, even though the hardware may still be operating and functioning fine, is risky. That is an insecure system. You need to isolate it. You need to factor in it is no longer receiving any security updates. Just as a reminder, when operating systems go end of life from the software vendor takes the stance that we are no longer testing it, we are no longer patching it, and we are no longer securing it. So, if for no other reason to do the upgrade, increase your security posture to do the upgrade. You want to have systems that provide protection from malicious code and malware. Not all antivirus products do this. They will do malware, but not necessarily malicious code. And what I mean by malicious code, I mean like scripts and things that can run on your systems. You may, for those that are older, you may remember batch files, right? Well, batch file in and of itself is nothing wrong with, but it's just a series of commands that are done at the command line that do something. And this is often what people will do is they will use the built-in tools that you find inside of your operating systems to actually conduct tasks. When you're doing it that way, these things don't trigger your most security products, right? Because in and of itself, it's not a problem until the final execution is done, right? You could tell a task, you could have a thing go out to a web location and download a file. Well, in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with that, except if that file's malware, then there can be an issue there. Number 5, block newly created domains. And by domains, I mean web domains. And Dave, being a web guy, will cringe at this perhaps, but often attackers will set up a domain name that is very similar to your own domain name. Maybe they will change an O to a 0. So visually, a person won't be able to see, visually, your eyes won't see it. You'll read it as a correct domain name. And so they will spoof your email addresses, and it's very easy to get your signatures. So they will look like it's from you, but they're coming from a different domain, which is why you see some people have also added on your email. This email is coming from an outside domain. That's another thing that people can do is on the email side is tag external emails coming in, because you would have a problem that if your colleague just sent you an email and it says coming from the outside, Well, that didn't come from your colleague, right? Newly created domains can be blocked in several ways. They can be blocked. Most modern firewalls will now block these. Most DNS filters have an ability to block these. Most websites today have been established for a long time. It's these websites that are basically clones that are trying to attack you. And we've seen some situations where they've put some effort into building up these fake domains in order to conduct their attack. The other thing, and this number 6 falls along, limit the authority to install software. We used to talk about this as remove domain administrator rights from people, from the ability to have that, or local admin access on their computers. Those are still good things to do. However, we feel you need to take it further these days. And by further, it's really taking in a zero trust security approach. Zero trust, you're going to hear more about this as time goes on, has to do with taking a stance. It's really more of an architectural design, and so you can have zero trust solutions in multiple areas in your IT network. But I'm not going to trust you by default, and so rather I have to explicitly say what I'm going to trust. So for example, I'm not going to let any software run on that computer except for the software that I have pre-designated to run. That zero trust solution limits the authority to install software and run software on that computer, and even scripts. Again, new technology that has come out within the last few years that again was used in either enterprise environments. Now we're seeing this come down to us as the rest of the world is susceptible to this as well. In a work from home and work from a hybrid workforce these days, firewalls are still important. So you want to provide firewall security for your internet connection. So you need to think through about how you're going to do that. In office environments, typically you'd have the firewall there, and you should have a unified threat management firewall. Your cable modem router is not a firewall. It may provide, depending on what you have, it may provide some basic protection, but it's not a unified threat management firewall. You can also put firewall services on your laptops. We recommend to do both: firewall in your network environment, and then also on the endpoint device. Another thing, number 8, use password management systems. There's some great corporate password management systems out there, and the business versions take it to another level. The personal versions, are generally geared towards individuals, but some of the business versions, you can do two-factor authentication, a shared two-factor authentication on passwords. It'll do logging for you. On the corporate systems, they will you can see who's accessed what passwords. You can run reports. So if there was an incident, or if you had an employee leave and you wanted to know, hey, what did they recently look at, using password management systems is a great way to have insight into that. We have seen attacks against Office 365 when they get into your email. Once they get into your email, they can get into the rest of what that employee has access to within Office 365. The next thing they start to do is they will download all your documents. And so if you have documents stored, spreadsheets with passwords, they're going to find those and they're going to download them, and you're going to be in a world of hurt trying to figure out where everything is at. So get rid of your password spreadsheets, move them into a password management system where they can be two-factor authenticated and secured, logged, and monitored. You want to employ both email and browser defenses. A lot of times people think that maybe when they get something new that things are configured in a certain way. When we talk about things like Microsoft Office 365, they give you a platform to work with. It's up to you to be able to secure that platform, lock it down, harden it, add the appropriate components. You can add things like their advanced threat protection level of service, which takes their anti-spam, anti-filtering, gives you things like safe links on the browser side. So do this. Also, just be cognizant of IT folks. Sometimes when they run into a problem with sometimes security products, they turn things off. So when you think you have something turned on, you need to kind of periodically reevaluate to make sure that things are still the way you expected them. Again, protect, number 10, protect the backup, your backup servers and components. It's interesting to see if anybody who's if any of you have cybersecurity and cyber liability insurance, a lot of them are starting to expect these kinds of things that I'm talking about in your insurance policies, because they've gotten hammered in the past few years on these policies, in particular because people haven't progressed their security posture. Security is one of those things where you can't just hey, we did something last year and now we're secure. Well, that security is a point in time thing, right? So you have to actually keep coming back. When you have a system like Office 365 that in the entire Microsoft 365 Azure, they add 2 new features a day. So just by fact of doing nothing, you will drift from your current stance to a section that needs to be reviewed and for the new things, and you have to relook at that and say, hey, is this environment still secure? One of the speaking of that journey, these are all the different areas that one needs to look at when doing an evaluation. So you have 2 sides of it. You have the monitoring and response, you have the prevention. We think about perimeter security, the firewall security, the network security, the endpoint security, right? Application security, your data, and then your data side security, right? Like things like data loss prevention, right? Different things like that. But core to that, if you can see, is the vulnerability assessment and the SIM security, SOC and NOC. Those are in the core side of the coin. So anyhow, so that brings the conclusion for me on this webinar. So start securing your business today. Download the slide deck at acouplegurus.com/ibda. And if anyone has any questions, certainly feel free to reach out to us. And
we do have some questions that have been posted into chat, Keith. So wanted to encourage everyone that's online. This is your chance to talk to a cybersecurity expert. I go to Keith all the time for my big questions, so make sure that we're peppering him. And if you'd like to talk on the webinar as well, just raise your hand. There's a raise hand tool in the GoToWebinar control panel. So raise your hand and I'll allow folks to talk if you'd rather just chat out your questions. And as a reminder, this part of our webinar is being recorded. And so we'll probably wait like 15 minutes or so worth of questions. And then if there is someone that wants to have a question, offline with Keith, we will stop the recording to let offline conversations happen as well. So thanks, everybody. The first question that I got as people were posting in, actually, I posted this up to the entire group after someone posted into me. Do subdomains count as newly created domains? And this comes as a marketer, like we set up subdomains all the time. Is that something that would count?
Yeah, it's looking at the primary domain. So predominantly, so your subdomains should be fine because your primary hasn't changed.
Okay.
So your, a couple of gurus or your busyweb.com domains, those are your primary domains. So anything that are subdomains, that should still flow, and you shouldn't have any issues with that. If you create a domain for a landing page, that's where you need to be kind of thinking about it from that perspective.
That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Another question that came in was, can you share some of the password tools that you mentioned before?
Yeah, so the first two that come to mind are Passportal and LastPass. There are several others that are also out there, but those are two corporate ones that are available. Again, we're not necessarily impartial to anyone. We just want to see people using these technologies because that's you have too much risk when you put all of your passwords in a single, very accessible document, kind of a thing.
Awesome. Kathy Sadaka asks, is anyone small enough to not have to worry about cybersecurity?
Yeah, it's a good question. When I first started learning to drive a motorcycle, and I bought my first helmet, I didn't know what helmet to buy, and I went to the store and I asked, what helmet do you recommend for for driving motorcycle? And the guy asked, well, do you have a $200 head or a $600 head?
Yeah.
And I thought, okay.
Yeah.
I would say no, obviously, right? I think both as individuals, you see this, especially, when you think about it, like the older generation who has a hard time with changing technology, our parents and things like that. That's where we need to really help them secure things. And again, just even on the personal side, there's no reason, if you have a Gmail account, two-factor it today. Your Facebook account, there's no reason for your Facebook account to get hacked. Two-factor it, so people don't think about that they can do those things, you've got to think of all of the things and look into the security options of the services that you use a lot of.
Okay. Excellent. We're getting a bunch of questions in, Keith. We've got from Kathy, how much security risk is on our phones? Many of us are running a lot of business through those mobile devices.
So there is some. So Apple phones are a little bit inherently a little more secure the way Apple has designed its ecosystem than Android phones, where you really open your security risk up. And you see this more so on the Android side than the Apple side is people will unlock or unbrick their phones so that they can gain access to any of the app stores. That's where you open yourself up a little bit as far as that goes. So on an Android phone, I would recommend running a security product for sure. And you can still run like DNS filtering products as well on any of the phones. But really it goes into is if you start down the path of, and sometimes this is more so maybe your kids are into, they're unlocking their phones or doing things, so there's a little more risk on when you start doing those kinds of things.
Excellent. Steve asks, are Mac systems safer as computers?
So it's that is a misnomer. And so we've seen an increased, because people have felt that Mac systems are safer. It has nothing to do with Mac systems are safer. It has to do with previously there weren't enough Mac systems out there for them to be a target. Today there are enough Mac systems for them to be a target. So if you're going to go through the rigorous work of creating malware and all of this and whatnot, you're going to use the largest potential attack vector, which has been the Windows side of the world. Now that Mac has grown in popularity, we are seeing Mac malware come out now. And the other piece of it is we've also seen Macs be a conduit for malware to the rest of the network. So you still want to run security products on the Mac as along with the Windows side of the world. You think about it this way, right? It's a computer, it's a node on your network. Why would you leave a potential open door on one side just because you think it's not an attack vector, but you would harden the other side? That doesn't make any sense, right? And so attackers are realizing this and they go, okay, well, we'll just get in through the least secured system,
Wow. Yeah, agreed. John just posted a fantastic question. Can you offer a spend range for very small businesses up to 10 employees, small, kind of 10 to 100, medium, up to 1,000, and large companies? So let's start with like microbiz, up to 10.
Boy, that's a complicated question to answer because it really depends on your situation. So I'll answer a little bit this way to try and give him some insight. Is when we look at a customer, we look at the complexity of the infrastructure. So we have to look at like, what are you already doing and where are your gaps, right? So it is not uncommon, if you're spending, and I'll just use some broad numbers. It's not uncommon if you're spending $1,000 a month on the traditional, or $2,000 a month on the traditional side of the coin of the service and support. When you start adding all of the security monitoring and that side of the coin and all the systems that are required, you might double that, spend on the security side. Again, it depends what you have in place though, right? Like if you have some of this in place, it's not necessarily double, but, and this is why this is more of, historically, it's been in the enterprise space, because the people go, whoa, okay, that's cost some money. The security engineers cost a tremendous amount of money. So just having security engineers, in a SOC costs a tremendous amount of money. So, but I would use it that way without knowing your specific situation. I think if you looked at that traditional, and people look at the traditional service and support side, is everything from whether you're paying a service provider or an employee's salary, that's part of your IT spend. And it's part of your operating cost. So, you're going to increase that spend when you start really digging into the security side on it. But, hopefully that, you kind of look at it this way. If your house has been hardened, right? They're going to skip over the house that's too hard to get into.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, like, why bother, right? So I'd rather be that person.
Sure, sure. Well, and I think the other thing that comes to mind when we're talking about spend, especially for small businesses and micro businesses or even solopreneurs, it's pretty inexpensive to just take some of the common things that you posted up. I mean, two-factor authentication is free, baby.
Yep.
Having a password manager is what, max $100 a month if you go like
Yep.
all in enterprise crazy on like one password or keep pass or one last pass or whatever. And so doing something is inexpensive compared to what happens if you don't do anything.
Yep.
And it's the same reason you have like your security system signs in front of your house. You want to make it look less attractive, and if they can't get in right away, they're going to move on to the next guy.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Another question coming in, and thanks, John, for the question. Another one, how about Internet of Things stuff? So like the light bulbs and the thermostats and the cameras and the smart appliances. Is there a way to secure those? Because I hear a lot of things about people getting those hacked, and that's like the entry point.
Yeah. So again, best practice there is put them on their own wireless network separate from the rest of the infrastructure, right? So that if that device for some reason was compromised, it doesn't have access to anything, right? So that's where we get into network segmentation, but network segmentation can simply be as simple as a second wireless SSID network that doesn't have access to the primary wireless SSID network.
Right.
You're still going to be able to use those devices and whatnot. Where you hear, for those of you at home, if you have, Ring network, turn on your two-factor authentication, right? There's no reason a compromised password should be able to get into your Ring network,
Right. Well, I think a lot of people think that, especially like Ring doorbells, they're like, well, I don't care. All they can see is my street. But if they're connected to your network, they can get into everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Are there common things that you should share or that you can share? Like a lot of us have older family members, and you mentioned that in your talk. Something that I try to share with like my parents, for sure, my grandparents when they're around, is just never respond to a phone call or an email that you didn't originate, no matter how legit it looks, right? So I always, if you get something from the bank, call the bank. Don't call the number on that email, but call the actual bank, right? So any common tips for folks just to kind of give to their loved ones?
Yeah, I think that's really good. One that is really prevalent and has been going on for a while, and I'm still surprised. I guess maybe because for me it's not new, but where you're seeing a lot more phishing, which is phone phishing, and so they're either sending you text or they're calling you. I've seen. So one of the attacks is they will call you and say, I'm from Microsoft support, and we found malware on your computer. We're going to need to help you clean it up. And then what they do is they have you go to the command line and do some pings and just very simple networking stuff that, and they're like, look, see, you're compromised, because people have never seen a ping before. And they then will take remote control of your computer, and they get you to go to your bank. And guys, I will tell you, to work with Microsoft costs money, and it's a very strict process. They're not going to call you. Microsoft's never going to call you. It's a scam. You need to let your parents know that. You need to let those that you love know that Microsoft's not going to call you. That just not going to happen. Another big thing is helping them getting into a password management solution, and then you can LastPass has a backup, emergency backup designated person, so that can be you. So if for some reason they can't, something happens to them, you can set that up and then get access. That starts getting into legacy planning, but
Mhm. Oh, the questions are coming in hot and heavy, Keith. This is great. We've got one coming in. It's a comment. Getting a quote on increasing our cyber coverage, and according to his agent, rates have gone up because there are so many attacks with so many working remotely. Any general tips for remote workers or for managing that new crazy world that we're in?
Yeah, so that's why like how you're securing your systems matters. And so I would recommend that, so like a computer that you don't have control of is an unknown quantity, right? So our recommendation is that if you're going to have a work from home policy, you separate your business computer from the home computer, and that you as a business issue those computers so that you have control over them, you can secure them, you can do all of those things which you can't do on somebody's home computer. And at least they are legally allowed to refuse you to do that, and then you have another issue. So the control your assets and harden your assets. We take a viewpoint of that you should secure a laptop as if it's always in a hostile environment. So if you take that approach, you think differently about it, and you want to also think about how many layers of security do you have on there, and make the assumption that one of your layers is going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen antivirus on a system but no longer working, and
Yep.
people like, I've got it installed, yeah, but it's not working.
Right.
Who's managing it? Who's monitoring it? Who's checking it to make sure it's working? Right.
Right. And that can be a liability in and of itself, because if you have something, if it was updated because there was a security hole and you didn't upgrade that. I mean, I get that all the time with websites. We constantly update all of our client websites, 350 websites, and we're constantly updating them because there's software stuff. And if you don't do that, you're going to get hacked.
Right.
Let's see here. Spreading them around. Dixie Cup 1960. I'm going to get back to you in a second. In light of cyber attacks, Kevin says, in light of cyber attacks, how often are you recommending business owners meet with their insurance agents to understand cyber coverage limits?
So that's really a good question. What's more, it's interesting to see. I've seen a couple of different policies. I think the hard thing, the questions you need to ask is to really understand what's covered and what's not covered. I've seen policies now being written in a way that they are excluding the most common attacks, or they won't cover you if you don't have certain security things in place. So I think you just really need to understand where your coverage is, and what it does cover and what it doesn't cover. Because you can, the way they're worded very very articulately. And so, you really have to kind of scrutinize it and understand it. There are a lot of people losing their coverage because they don't have the right things in place.
Wow. Kathy asks, what's the first thing I should do once I've figured out that I've fallen for a phishing scam?
Unplug your computer from the internet.
Go out to a campground somewhere and live off the land for a
while. Change your password. Turn on two-factor authentication. Those are the things I would do immediately. If your password, typically when you fell for a phishing scam, they often will send an email from what you perceive as a trusted source, i.e. someone you work for. This is my boss, he's asking me to look at this spreadsheet. it's password protected. He's just telling me to use my email username and password. Okay, that's how they get it, right? You need to immediately change your password and immediately turn on two-factor authentication, because they'll hijack your account and do it for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yikes. Wow.
And then check your Outlook rules. They will often turn on Outlook rules. Typically, actually, they'll monitor you for 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks to just actually learn your behavior. So often people are in your system way longer before you realize it, which is why you need the monitoring aspect of it, because by the time most people have realized they've been hacked, they were actually hacked months ago.
Mm-hmm. Yikes. So start looking at it, check credit reporting, all that stuff, making sure you're on top of that, right? Oh.
Yeah.
For Jody, she asks, please explain more about how to be sure about your Ring device is secure and like the network thing. Yeah, what do you mean by that with having separate networks?
So you can when you set up your wireless network at home, you might call it My Home Wireless, right? Well, just set up another one that says My Device Wireless or something, right? Call it something else, and then you connect those devices to that network instead of your primary
Sure.
My Home network. Just as simple as that.
Sure.
And that creates most wireless solutions can do that today. Older ones maybe not, but most modern ones can do that. Often you'll see I have My Wireless Home and My Guest, right? That's different networks.
Right.
Your Guest network is a different network, so you could use the Guest network and put it on that, but just you can separate them out from that perspective.
Right. So having a guest network and logging into that as a minimum, maybe naming that guest network CIA surveillance van would be to make sure nobody logs into it, right?
Yeah.
That kind of fun stuff. Let's see. I think we're mostly caught up on questions, guys. This is your chance to ask a cybersecurity expert everything you wanted to know. So please keep those questions going, or raise your hand if you'd just rather talk. Because this is, of course, your time. As we wait for additional questions to come in, I think for the folks that, and I think we've all experienced this, the Facebook hacks where people will set up new accounts under you or like pretending to be you. What's the point of that? And how does that even work?
Yeah, good question. Those are harder, right? Because anybody can set up a Facebook account. They're going after a social engineering, right? Aspect of it. Things you'd be surprised at how much information one can gather by perusing someone's social media, right? And usually what they're trying to do is attack your network. So by emulating or impersonating you, they're looking at getting to someone vulnerable, like your parents or something, right? Somebody who goes, oh, this is my son, I'm going to obviously accept a connection from him, and now they know they've got someone vulnerable they're working with. And so they might, anytime that someone's asking you to send money, man, you need to question that, right? Like pick up the phone. It surprises me how many people just do it and don't like pick up the phone. Like, huh? For sure.
I see Dave's on with us. Dave, welcome. What questions do you have for Keith?
Well, more just a comment. I mean, I'm I went to the Naval Academy, I'm the local alumni association. We've got a program coming up in a couple of weeks. It's all about the title is Cybersecurity Threats and Mitigation, the intersection of national and corporate security. We've got a panel coming up. The former commander for U.S. Fleet Cyber Command, Admiral White, the chair of the Department of Cyber Science at the Naval Academy, Ken Morris from Connect IQ, and Bob Katnack from he's a cybersecurity lead at Dorsey and Whitney. I can send you some information about that. Talk about timeliness. We set this thing up about 9 months ago, and then the last 3 months we've had all sorts of free advertising about it. So it's at the Minneapolis Club. It's also going to be broadcast. So I can send you some information on it. I can post it in chat.
Yeah, post the link in chat.
Post it on chat, yeah.
Okay.
The reality is the more we can educate the community, the better it is for all of us. We are, we're from the computer side of the world. We're in a real hostile environment right now, and it's not anything like I've seen before. The volume is just unbelievable right now of what's going on, and the majority of people aren't seeing it, except we're seeing it when these breaches are occurring or when people are contacting us. But I can tell you the reason why the government created the CMMC body. CMMC stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, was because the defense industrial base was not doing all of the appropriate things they needed to do to secure the supply chain, and recognize that a more clear set of standards needed to be put in place. And so we use that as our reference point, and when we look at securing our customers is, let's secure you in the same way that the DIB is securing their ecosystem. So let's look at those things and those technologies and have some conversations about that. And look, guys, you can't do it all at once, but you got to start, right? So you've got to take some action today, right? If you take no other action, turn on two-factor authentication on one of your accounts today, right? Just do that, right? If you take no other action, take the time to learn it. Now's the time, because or just drain your bank account today, because that's what's going to happen.
Right.
I mean, it's just the reality.
Wow. Yeah. Well, this is fantastic, Keith. I know we wanted to give a little nod out to our upcoming event. So if you can share quick again for our Sharon Jeet's event coming up in a month's time. I think we're back to our regular Wednesday schedule next time. So look for us at 8 a.m. on the first Wednesday on the last Wednesday of May, correct? And so I'm looking at that. Probably would be the 25th. And let's see here. So make sure that you dial that in. And we've got Charanjit Gill, who is our operations expert, who's going to be running an event on that. Do you have the title of that, Keith? I don't see that.
I do not have the title of the talk that he's going to be doing. But he does a lot of work in the supply chain area, so
brilliant guy.
It'll be interesting.
International supply chains, offshoring is still with us, says Steve. Thank you, Steve, for popping us in on that. And so look for that on the third Wednesday, I believe. So yep, third Wednesday. So that would be May 18th is coming up. So make sure that you put that on there, and just keep up. If you're not subscribed, or if you found us via another channel, make sure that you subscribe to the EBITDA Partners website. It's ebitapartners.com, and you can subscribe to our email. Oh, Steve says that I was originally right. It's May 25th. So make sure that you dial in on May 25th. Again, you'll be getting all those emails and things with us. Make sure to check in on EBITDA Partners to connect up with Keith. You're going to want to email Keith at acoupleofgurus.com. And remember that he's got a special page for us to get access to the content that we talked through today, as well as a few other things at acoupleofgurus.com/EBITDA, EBITDA. Thank you so much, Keith. Fantastic job today, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. We're going to be posting this up to the EBITDA Partners YouTube channel as well. And yeah, thank you. Any parting words of wisdom for us, Keith?
Just I appreciate the time. I think the biggest thing is ask questions, right? I've seen a lot of situations where there's been communication between a service provider and a client, where they've been trying to make suggestions or proposals, and they kind of go on deaf ears. And if you don't understand why they're making the suggestion or proposal, you need to dig deeper, right? Or you don't have the right service provider. If you don't trust what your service provider is trying to help secure you in, then you need to find a service provider that you have trust in. So but I've had more than one situation occur where people go, "You told us about this." Like, yeah. And it's funny because after you have that kind of a thing, then they listen to everything you tell them.
Right.
And we're just here to try and make progress forward and help grow each other's businesses and secure what you've worked so hard to put together, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
Just think about all of the effort that you guys have done to get your business to where it is today, right? Don't let an outside attacker bring it to a halt, because the reality is some of you won't survive it.
Yeah.
And no one thinks about that aspect. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Keith. And thanks to EBITDA Partners for hosting. Keep in touch with us, and we'll talk to you next third Wednesday on the 25th, or fourth Wednesday, I guess, on the 25th of May. And everybody, thanks again. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Keith.
Have a great one.
Bye, everybody.